Our next speaker's last name is spelled M-A-C-K, but it's not Sheriff Mack, and you haven't heard the last of him either, but we have a Judge Mack, Judge Wayne L. Mack, 35-year resident of Montgomery County, has had a distinguished career of public service, starting out as a custodian working the night shift for the Montgomery County Building Maintenance with Montgomery County, cleaning the courthouse in downtown Conroe, Texas. He has over 30 years of service with Montgomery County government, and after graduating from Lone Star College Police Academy, became a law enforcement officer and began an almost 15-year career in law enforcement, working as a reserve captain at the Precinct 1 Constable's Office and as a reserve sergeant at the Conroe Police Department, and an MAP deputy with the Constable Precinct 2. In 2014, Judge Mack was elected to serve as a Justice of the Peace for Justice Court 1. He has court offices in Willis and Montgomery, Texas. And when he came into office, he started the Justice Court Chaplaincy Program that includes over 60 members across Montgomery County, representing all faiths that respond to assist law enforcement in times of crisis and tragedy to help families start the process of grieving and healing. Serving his community to the fullest and always making himself available when needed is the key factor in why Judge Mack and his team are so strong. Judge Mack is a true example of servant leadership. He's making Montgomery County better for all the residents by doing and not just saying. In addition to his role as Justice of the Peace, Judge Mack has served on 15 different nonprofit boards in Montgomery County, and he formed and leads 250 volunteers, wow, within the Montgomery County Behavioral Health and Suicide Prevention Task Force. Wow, that's an important task these days. And teaches mental health classes for the American Foundation of Suicide Prevention. Judge Mack was recently named Justice of the Peace of the Year 2020 by the Justice of the Peace and Constable Association of Texas. Outstanding. And Judge Mack is happily married to his beautiful wife, Mindy, who works for the Conroe Police Department. He has 3 grown children, Austin, Amber, and Michelle, 6 grandchildren. And Judge Mack and his family live their life to the motto of make a difference every day. Please help me give a warm CSPOA welcome to Judge Mack.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. God bless y'all. Welcome to the greatest county in Texas. Yeah. All right, I got some home folks here. That's good. That's good. I'm honored to be here, and I appreciate it. And it's an exciting time that we live in. It's a difficult time. We got COVID going on here in Texas. We just went through Snowvid 2021. And I was born and raised in Wisconsin, got to Texas 36 years ago, and I moved here so I wouldn't have to deal with what we did last week. And as I was shoveling my driveway, my son was with me, and we were shoveling the driveway and getting the snow so we can get in and out. And he looked at me, and he was born and raised here in Montgomery County. And he looked at me and he said, "Daddy, I know why you moved to Texas." I said, "Well, what we're doing right now, I did 8 months out of the year, because I tell my folks in Wisconsin, my dad's still 93, my mom's at home and retired teacher, and he just quit riding his Harley a couple years ago. Not because he couldn't, it was because he was afraid he was going to wreck the bike. But I tell them that they have 4 seasons up there: June, July, August, and winter. We live in an unprecedented time here today, and the entire world is watching the United States of America. The entire world. Our founding fathers, the Pilgrims and the Mayflower Compact, their prayer was that that America would be that city on a hill. And that flag that we proudly fly represents freedom to so many. And we have to understand, and everyone in this room is a patriot, you understand this, you get this. Unfortunately, we've been asleep at the wheel. the faith community, patriots like ourselves, we've been busy doing our jobs, we've been busy working, we've been busy doing our things, and we've allowed academia to be taken over and all the things that have happened, that this 60-year cancel culture thing that's been happening that is trying to eradicate what we all believe to be true is our constitutional freedoms and liberty are at stake. And they are at stake because we've allowed a vocal minority to get a hook in our society. We've believed into the law that what they call a law that is not a law, the separation of church and state. It's a fallacy. It's a separation of state from the church, and we've allowed this to happen. And what makes America so awesome and such a place that everybody wants to come to is the fact that we have freedom. And I'm preaching to the choir here, so just let me go with it. You know, you can say amen if you want every now and then. That just made me feel at home. But the miracle of America and our founding fathers took, well, on their bended knee, asking for divine intervention, asking for what we know as the Constitution and our Bill of Rights, the greatest documents that's ever been written by the human pen. And it's taken that document and has given us the ability to be free. 245 years ago, this July 4th, they took the moral truths of Jerusalem, they took the reasoning of Athens, they took the sense of law from Rome, the checks and balances of London, and they put it all together in Philadelphia and come up with these two great documents we call the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. And they wrote that document, the Declaration of Independence. They weren't free. They just declared they were going to be. And Sheriff Mack, I appreciate you allowing me to be here today, and I'm just honored that y'all would come to our county and be here. I know Sheriff Henderson was here. I'm glad that we have a constitutional sheriff in our county and believes in the Constitution. When we had these crazy mandates coming through COVID, and they were trying to tell us that we were going to have to wear a mask, and if we didn't, they would be arrested. Our sheriff took a stand immediately that wasn't going to happen in Montgomery County. And I realized, in our previous speaker talked about the separation of powers. I was in law enforcement for 15 years, and we, and the legislative branch, the executive branch, the judicial branch of governments are there to provide that check and balance. And what I love about being in my position, I've been the Justice of the Peace in Montgomery County for 2,493 days, 4 hours, and what time is it? 50 minutes. But who's counting? It's just been my opinion that if you can count something, you can measure it. If you can measure it, you can improve it. 12 years ago, this December 17th, I was given a terminal diagnosis of cancer. And they told me I needed to accept the fact that I would never be in remission, I would never be cured. The best I could hope for, I'd be in a controlled state or uncontrolled state. And I looked at the doctor just down here, 50 miles down the road, MD Anderson, the world's greatest cancer research hospital. And I told that doctor, I said, well, Doc, I'm going to do everything you tell me to do, but until I hear from Dr. Jesus, I'm going to beat this thing. And 3 years later, they told me I was in remission. 5 years later, they told me I was cured, and the doctor come in to MD Anderson shaking his head and holding my file. And if you're ever in a cancer hospital, you see death in every stage. And when the doctor comes in shaking his head, holding your folder, that's an oh God moment, because you're like, oh God, what's he about to tell me? And he said, I can't explain it, Mr. Mack, but you're what we call a cure around here. And I said, I can. I can. And I had that liberty and that choice and that freedom to make that decision. And we know as Americans the assault and the things that are going on, and the elected officials that understand what the Constitution is our last protection from this overreach of this monster called the federal government. and the things that are happening. You know, Washington has perfected two things: doing nothing and overreacting. They've perfected that. And our system is designed on a level, as you know, to protect us from this. And we know that from the Declaration of Independence and from the Constitution that we have the freedom to think. We have the freedom to worship. We have the freedom to live as free men and women and to work and enjoy the fruits of our labor. The key to our liberty, however, is recognizing as a people that freedom is not free. On November 11th, 1620, when the Pilgrims came forward and they landed there and they made the Mayflower Compact and all the things that they did, and the 102 brave souls that were on that 66-day journey as they come and they landed in the new colonies in the Americas, when they landed here, within a year, over half of those people would be dead. But yet they were determined that they were going to be free. The signers of the Declaration of Independence, many of them died paupers. Many of them that penned that great document died poor so we could be free. The men and women in this room that have taken that oath and are willing to stand on that thin blue line that seems to be getting thinner and thinner and thinner every day. That they're willing to stand against evil and the tyranny and the overreach of government and the craziness that's going on in this world. This movement to cancel our history and the movement to defund the police and all this craziness that's going on is a byproduct of what? Of them not realizing that freedom is not free. Freedom is not free. There has to be somebody that's willing to do this. The preamble of our Constitution, we the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union. Didn't say perfect union, but a more perfect union. We've taken 245 years to get where we're at today. And we've had bumps in the road, and we've had things that have gone on that we're not proud of. But the main thing is that we recognize that freedom is not free, and we cannot let anyone take that from us. Anyone. To establish justice, to ensure domestic tranquility, to provide common defense, to promote general welfare, secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves, do ordain and establish the Constitution of the United States of America. Freedom is not free, ladies and gentlemen. As I told you, I've been the Justice of the Peace for 2,493 days, and I consider it an honor. The highest honor your community can give you is public trust. Highest honor. And it's an honor I don't take lightly. We're blessed in Montgomery County. We have great local government. State Representative Steve Toth is here, and the things that he's doing in a legislative level, and the things and other elected officials that I'm sure have been here today. But I wish every elected official in Montgomery County was here to see that across the nation that we're not alone. That there are other people with like-mindedness that believe in the Constitution and aren't afraid to stand up. And that when you raised that right hand and you solemnly swore to uphold, that you were going to do that no matter the cost. Freedom's not free. Biggest problem with America right now is the selfishness of people thinking that they're owed something. I just had a juvenile docket today in my court, and because our Texas Supreme Court has decided judges aren't smart enough to keep people safe in the courtroom, we're having to do most of it virtually. And I hate that. Yeah, I don't even like answering email on my cell phone, so you can imagine how I'm doing with a camera and a microphone, and talking to people and the young people that I had. And I had a young lady that was on this docket today, and she's with an aunt, and she's been in foster care, and it's just a terrible, sad situation. At 14 years old, she's on probation for possession of marijuana, and then she's in my court for theft. And I just started talking to her and peeling back the onion and just talking to her and saying to her, you know, calling her by name and say, you know, this is not your destiny. You've done all these things, but this is not who you are. If you choose to stop doing what you're doing and make a change, this will be your past and it won't be your destiny. And I watched her. Thank you. And she just began to weep. She'd never had anybody say, I believe in you. She'd never had anybody say, you can do better, and I'm going to help you do that. That's what's so great about our nation and about our privilege to serve in these roles. And you're here today, and you've made the journey here because you believe in freedom. You believe in liberty. You believe that you have a duty to protect the citizens. And if you're here as a citizen, you believe that the government government should fear us, and we shouldn't fear the government. Please, somebody say amen. Thank you. And for some reason, we've gotten to the point where we think government's the answer, and you and I both know that they can't do it because they can only, I'm trying to be polite, but. Help yourself. And so it's so very incumbent upon us. The world is looking at us. Your communities are looking at you. You are the hope of our nation. And I don't know what the number that's here today, but I know that 102 people got on a ship called the Mayflower and made the journey fleeing religious persecution and said, we don't want to live under that. And then within a year, there were less than 40 of them. But we're here today. We have the liberty we have today because somebody believed that with God, all things were possible. 12 years prior to that historical voyage, while they were struggling to adapt, they'd left England and they were in the Netherlands, and it was a little bit friendlier. But it's for 12 years, this group tried to make a decent living, and they sought financial backing from London merchants, and they came to the colonies of America, and they started that journey on September 6th. And like we've already said, 102 passengers, and William Bradford, who would one day be the governor of the Plymouth colony, referred to them first as the Pilgrims because they were on a pilgrimage for freedom and for liberty. And these pilgrims floating that little floating republic that would one day become the United States of America. This community of faith, this community of we want to be free. When they landed, three things they made up in their mind: that they would be self-governing, that no one would have to tell them to do the right thing, that they would do the right thing when nobody was looking. That is the one thing I learned as a custodian for 25 years. And in my bio, I tell people my memoir is going to be from janitor to judge and all the crap I cleaned up in between. Would you buy that book? All right. I'm going to get Jake back there with the Institute of Constitution. That's my friend back there. He got a great video that I use all the time. I'm being sued by atheists. It's really interesting. I'm April 5th. I'm going to go on my third trip to federal court. The chaplaincy program that they mentioned in my bio, we have literally every mosque, every temple, every synagogue, every church you could imagine represented in our chaplaincy program. And as an opening ceremony before we begin court, we honor them for their service. They take turns being on call. One of my duties as the justice of the peace in our county is I'm also the coroner. I've had about 12 hours sleep this week. I had a double fatality crash of an 18-year-old and a 20-year-old that I worked Wednesday night. I had a situation where a lady died in her driveway yesterday. And these scenes are very chaotic. You know what they are. You've been on death scenes. You know what it is to give a death notification. In our county, our law enforcement agencies had chaplains, but it was for their agency. And so we started this chaplaincy program, and I was hoping to get 10 to 15 people to be a part of it, and we have over 75 today that are a part of this. 4 or 5 of them are on call 24/7. They do this at no expense to our taxpayers. They volunteer, they do the training. Many of them pay for their own training, and we use them in the event that somebody requests a chaplain in these dark, dark hours. And to thank them before we begin our court, we acknowledge them, we thank them, and if they choose to do so, we allow them to give a brief invocation. And then we do the pledges to our great nation and to our great state. And an organization called Freedom from Religion in Wisconsin, I know I'm from Wisconsin, but I'm not kin to any of them, I promise you, sued me because they're offended that what we do is unconstitutional. Yet the Texas Supreme Court, U.S. Supreme Court, all have a brief invocation at the beginning of the opening ceremony of their court. I figured if the Texas Supreme Court, the U.S. Supreme Court can do it, Judge Mack can do it. And so we're being sued and all that stuff, and I had to give a deposition. I can't talk about it because it's a pending matter. Worst 10 hours of my life. Ripping through my life and some of the bizarre questions I was asked. I'm like, holy cow, I'm starting to think I'm in Moscow or something. It was terrible, the things that they were asking and things they were saying. And I'm telling you all this because when the Pilgrims landed in 1620, they had the Mayflower Compact and these guiding principles. And when they landed, merchants funded them to go to the new colonies. And that part of that funding was that 50% of everything they grew, 50% of everything they did would go back to these merchants to pay for that trip. So everything they did had to be 50% of it went back to somebody else. And at first they started this kind of a communal, everybody put their resources together. And what they found in the beginning parts of that journey was that there were some people that would work really hard and others just kind of kicked back because they would all get the same thing. How does that sound familiar? Fast forward. How does that sound that 50% of what you go is going to places that, the funding the research of the mating habits of trout? That is not a function of government. But we've allowed that to happen. People say, well, we need term limits. Well, I got news for you. Just about every elected office in America, every 4 years, you can unelect the dummy that's not doing their job. But the problem is the faith community and people that believe what we believe today have thought freedom's not free, and we've allowed that to happen. We've allowed our school boards to eradicate civics, and children coming out of school don't even understand the basics of government. They think government's the answer. Dear Lord, baby Jesus. Government was never intended to be the answer. It was intended to be a vehicle. It was intended to make sure we have roads and law enforcement and protected from our national enemies. But we never was intended for it to control every aspect of our life. And you as individuals, you as parents, you're patriots in this last hour in this time in which we live, it's so important that you stand up for this. And don't be weary. Don't give up. 40 people as pilgrims. We are the greatest superpower and economic power in the world. We are the bastion of freedom. We're that light up on a hill, even though our light seems a little dim right now and the clouds have come in. But I'm very convinced that the darker the night, the brighter the light. So it can get as evil and chaotic as it wants, but as long as there is one American that's willing to stand up and fight for what they believe is true, it's going to be all right. But what can happen across our nation, from the north to the south to the east and the west, if we would all begin to stand up and do it and declare it loud and uninhibited, the freedoms that we have, and demand and tell our elected officials in our communities that freedom's not free and we're willing to pay whatever price it takes to preserve that. I was told when I first got my lawsuit from this atheist organization that I need to consider, was it really all that important? In fact, if I was to tell Steve who told me this, he would probably be shocked. Because they said, you know, Wayne, we like you where you're at. You're doing a great job, and they could potentially remove you from office. And this was somebody I had a lot of confidence in. And so when I left that room, it was disappointing because I thought this meeting would be about, you stick in there, we got your back, you got this. And it was turned into an inquisition of all the reasons why I should just give up. It was going to cost money. I could potentially lose my job. And all these things. When judicial conduct, they filed a judicial conduct violation initially, and I talked to the executive director of judicial conduct, and I said, hey, what am I supposed to do? I mean, they said, well, we just want to have a conversation with you. And I said, well, do I need to bring an attorney? They said, well, not really. I don't think so. We just want to have a conversation with you. So I brought 3. Yeah. First Liberty Institute. Anybody heard of them? Yeah. They've been with me. First year I was on my own, but for the last 6 years they've been with me. When we go to trial on April 5th, I have 9 attorneys that have been working on my case from Gibson Dunn. And the best part is they have this huge office building in Dallas, and I forget how many floors they have. I don't know what they charge per hour, but they're doing it for me for free. Yeah, thanks to First Liberty Institute. And to say it's not been discouraging, and it's not been difficult, and Sheriff Richard Mack knows what it is to go through federal lawsuits and all those things, and it's very taxing and it takes away from my mission. One of the things I realized early on when I got into office as a justice of the peace is that we have a lot of suicides that happen in our community. I had no idea was happening. What I learned in the United States, that the second leading cause of death from 10 to 35-year-olds is suicide. Suicide kills more young people than cancer. And so being a part of that task force and getting that going and then having to deal with this lawsuit and all the other stuff that goes with that is very much of a distraction. But what Freedom from Religion from Wisconsin did not figure out is that, number one, they picked the wrong county in Texas, and they certainly picked the wrong judge. Yeah. I was speaking at Eastham Prison, a story speaking to men, a part of a post-incarceration program before they get out of prison. And I was speaking at this prison, and in Texas, all the inmates wear white. So I'm looking at this crowd, and it's probably a little bit bigger than this crowd. And I'm telling my story about my janitor to judge story, and talking the way I talk to defendants in my courtroom. And it was very good. And at the end, they had a Q&A. And I didn't know they had the internet, Steve, in prisons, but apparently this guy did an internet search, and he says, hey, Judge Mack, I know you're being sued by atheists because of what you do in your courtroom. And I was kind of shocked by it because this guy's in prison. How does he know about this? And he said, I want to know one thing. How far are you prepared to go with this? And without even thinking about it, I looked at him and I said, well, if the next time you see I'm wearing white, you know it didn't work out too good. People are watching you. Your neighbors are watching you. There's never been a time where the righteousness and the holiness and the goodness of what our nation represents needs to shine. I mean, you're at a conference that's got George Washington. It can't get any better than that. Freedom's not free, ladies and gentlemen. And I want you to tell that message to your children, your grandchildren, your neighbor, your staff, everybody that will hear this message. Freedom is not free, and we have got to be willing to do whatever it takes to make sure that the cancel culture craziness that's going on in America right now runs into that wall. God said, I got 2 minutes, God said in his word that when the enemy comes in like a flood, he'll raise a standard up against it. You're that standard. You're that standard. And it doesn't matter the socialism, whatever term you want to put on it, whatever ism you want to call it, right is always right when nobody's looking. As a custodian sweeping and mopping the floors, not everybody can be a custodian. You have to have really great work habits to do that work, because you got to do the right thing when everybody's not looking. And I learned that. And we have got to continue to do that. And we can't back down. We can't be discouraged. And we need a renewal of liberty and hope and freedom to sweep over this nation. And I pray that you will do that. I pray you'll be, God doesn't need your abilities. He doesn't. He does not need your abilities. What he needs is your availability. Because if you'll make yourself available, if you be like the pilgrims that came across and they made themselves available, that they were going to not settle for anything less. Our founding fathers and those brave souls that signed that Declaration of Independence. The men and women that have gone to foreign lands and given and shed their blood. The men and women that put on that badge every day and they stand against tyranny and evil. That are willing to pay that price. Ladies and gentlemen, freedom is not free. God bless America. God bless Texas and every state in that union. That was pretty funny, I gotta say. Thank you all very much. God bless you.
Thank you, sir. Well done.